August 17, 1943, 26,000 feet above Regensburg, Germany. Lieutenant Robert Rosie Rosenthal watches through blood-spattered plexiglass as another B-17 Flying Fortress explodes off his right wing. The aircraft, sentimental journey, carrying 10 men he drank with last night, cartwheels toward the earth, trailing black smoke and body parts. His own bomber, Rosie's riveters, shudders as 20mm cannon shells punch through the fuselage. One round tears through the radio compartment. Another rips through the waist gunner's position, missing Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez by 6 inches. A third penetrates the number 3 engine, which immediately begins streaming oil and fire. Rosenthal counts the burning aircraft falling from formation. 7, 8, 9, 12, 15. His mission briefing said they'd lose maybe 5% of the force. The mathematics currently unfolding outside his windscreen suggests something closer to 25%. The problem isn't the bombers. The B-17 is a technological marvel. 4 engines, 13 50 caliber machine guns, armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks. The problem is, the Germans have figured out exactly where to shoot. Messerschmitt Bf-109s swarm the formation like angry hornets, concentrating their fire on specific areas. The cockpit, the engines, the wing roots, they're not wasting ammunition on random pot shots. They know the weak points, and they're exploiting them with surgical precision. Colonel Curtis LeMay stands in the operations room at 8th Air Force Headquarters in England, reading loss reports with a face carved from granite. The Regensburg-Schweinfurt raid, what historians will call Black Thursday, costs him 60 B-17s in a single day. 600 men. Gone. But it's the pattern that keeps him awake at night. The returning bombers all show damage in the same places. Wings riddled with holes. Tail sections shredded. Fuselage sides perforated like Swiss cheese. The Army Air Force's response is obvious. Add more armor to those damaged areas. Reinforce the wings. Strengthen the tail. Thicken the fuselage plating. Engineers at Wright Field already have proposals drawn up. More armor on the wings where the holes are concentrated, extra plating on the tail sections, reinforced fuselage panels where the bullet damage clusters. It's logical. It's sensible. It's what every military expert agrees must be done. There's only one problem. In a small office at Columbia University's Statistical Research Group, a 42-year-old mathematician with thick glasses and a heavy Hungarian accent is staring at the same damage reports. Abraham Wald reads the data 3 times, then pulls out a piece of paper and begins sketching. What he's about to propose will make every military expert in the room think he's lost his mind. His solution? Put the armor everywhere, except where the bullet holes are. The generals will call it crazy. The engineers will call it backwards. The aviation experts will call it mathematically impossible. They're all wrong, and Abraham Wald is about to save more American lives than any single weapon system developed during the entire war. What the military doesn't know yet is that they're looking at the data completely wrong. They're committing a logical fallacy so fundamental, so dangerous, that it's costing them thousands of lives. Abraham Wald sees what they can't. The bullet holes they're studying are on the planes that made it home. The fatal damage? That's on the planes that never came back. Act 2. Background and Failed Solutions. 620 words. The armor problem begins in 1942, when American B-17 Flying Fortresses first start flying deep penetration missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. The early results are catastrophic. On August 17, 1942, 12 B-17s attacked the Rouen-Sotteville rail yards in France, the first American heavy bomber mission over Europe. 1 bomber is lost. That's an 8% loss rate. Unacceptable, but survivable. 3 months later, on November 23, 1942, 31 B-17s attacked the U-boat pens at Saint-Nazaire. 3 failed to return, still manageable. But by mid-1943, the mathematics turned deadly. The second Schweinfurt raid on October 14, 1943, cost 60 bombers out of 291 launched, a 20.6% loss rate. At that attrition rate, entire bomb groups will cease to exist within weeks. Worse, the survivors return looking like flying scrap metal, hundreds of bullet holes, shredded control surfaces, engines torn apart by cannon fire. Some bombers land with over 200 documented hits. Colonel Malcolm C. Grow, Chief Surgeon of the 8th Air Force, visits a bomber base in England and watches the damaged aircraft return. He counts the holes, maps their locations, photographs the damage patterns. The evidence seems overwhelming. The wings take heavy damage, dozens of holes clustered around the fuel tanks. The fuselage sides are perforated. The tail sections are shredded by cannon fire. The rear gunner positions show concentrated damage. Grow sends his findings to Wright Field with an urgent recommendation. Add armor plating to the damaged areas. If wings are taking hits, armor the wings. If tails are getting shot up, armor the tails. The engineers agree completely. The Army Air Force's Material Command convenes an emergency meeting. Aviation designers from Boeing, Consolidated, and Lockheed attend. Everyone studies the same data. Photographs of returning bombers covered in bullet holes. The consensus is unanimous. Reinforce the areas showing damage. There's only one problem: where to put the armor without making the bomber too heavy to fly. A B-17G weighs 65,000 pounds, fully loaded. Every pound of armor added means one less pound of bombs, fuel, or ammunition. The engineers calculate they can add perhaps 500 pounds of additional armor plating without catastrophically impacting performance. But 500 pounds isn't nearly enough to armor all the damaged areas they're seeing. They need to make choices. Wright Field proposes Solution Alpha. Concentrate armor on the wings where fuel tanks are located. The reasoning is sound. Protect the fuel, protect the aircraft. Estimated weight, 480 pounds. Estimated bomber survivability improvement, 15%. Boeing counters with Solution Beta. Distribute armor across the fuselage to protect the crew compartments. Keep the pilots alive, keep the bomber flying. Estimated weight, 520 pounds. Estimated improvement, 18%. Consolidated suggests Solution Gamma. Heavy armor on the tail section where rear gunners show high casualty rates. Protect the defensive positions. Maintain firepower. Weight, 445 pounds. Improvement, 12%. Each proposal makes perfect sense based on the damage data. Each follows logical engineering principles. Each has strong advocates among experienced aviation designers. The debate rages for weeks. Meetings at the Pentagon. Technical conferences at Wright Field. Heated discussions in England between combat commanders and headquarters staff. Colonel Curtis LeMay, commander of the 305th Bomb Group, argues passionately for wing armor. If we lose engines or fuel, we go down. Armor the wings. Brigadier General Haywood S. Hansel Jr. counters, dead pilots can't fly. Armor the cockpit. General Ira Eaker, commanding the 8th Air Force, wants data. Hard numbers. Scientific analysis. In February 1943, the Statistical Research Group at Columbia University receives an urgent request from the military. They need mathematicians to analyze bomber vulnerability and recommend optimal armor placement. The SRG is an unusual organization, civilian mathematicians working on classified military problems. The roster reads like a who's who of American mathematics: Milton Friedman, future Nobel Prize winner; Leonard Jimmy Savage; Frederick Mosteller; W. Allen Wallace; and Abraham Wald. Wald is the group's most enigmatic member. Born in Hungary, Jewish, he fled Nazi-occupied Europe in 1938. He barely speaks English. He's never served in the military. He's never even seen a B-17 except in photographs. He has no aviation experience, no engineering background, no credentials that qualify him to advise on armor placement for combat aircraft. What he does have is a mind that sees patterns others miss. The military hands him boxes of damage reports, photographs of bullet-riddled bombers, and diagrams showing where returning aircraft took hits. They expect an answer in 2 weeks. Wald gives them one in 3 days, and it's the exact opposite of what every expert recommended. Act 3. Hero Introduction. 520 words. Abraham Wald doesn't look like a man who's about to revolutionize military aviation. At 42 years old, he stands 5'7", thin to the point of gaunt, with wire-rimmed glasses that constantly slip down his nose. His suits hang loose on his frame like laundry on a clothesline. He speaks English with such a thick Hungarian accent that colleagues sometimes need him to repeat sentences 3 times. His office at Columbia University is chaos. Papers stacked in precarious towers, mathematical journals spread across every surface, a chalkboard covered in equations that look like abstract art to anyone without a doctorate in statistics. But his background tells a different story. Born in Cluj, Romania in 1902 to a Jewish family, Wald showed mathematical brilliance early. By age 23, he'd completed his doctorate in mathematics at the University of Vienna. By 30, he was publishing groundbreaking work in geometry and econometrics that would later earn him comparison to giants like John von Neumann. Then came 1938. Nazi Germany annexed Austria. Jewish professors were fired. Wald, working in Vienna, suddenly found himself unemployable and in mortal danger. He fled to America with virtually nothing. Some clothes, a few books, his mathematical notebooks. He arrived in New York, speaking almost no English, with no job prospects and $43 in his pocket. The Cowles Commission for Research in Economics hired him almost by accident. They needed someone who could do advanced statistical analysis, and Wald came cheap. He spent 4 years in obscurity, publishing papers on econometrics that nobody outside specialized academic circles read. Then came December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor transformed America overnight. The government suddenly needed mathematicians, lots of them, to solve military problems. Statistical analysis of weapons effectiveness, probability calculations for mission planning, optimization of logistics and supply chains. In early 1942, the Statistical Research Group formed at Columbia University under the Office of Scientific Research and Development. They recruited the best mathematical minds available. Wald received an invitation letter in February. His credentials for military analysis? None. He'd never fired a gun, never sat in an aircraft, never set foot on a military base. He knew nothing about armor, nothing about aviation, nothing about combat tactics. What he knew was mathematics, specifically probability theory and statistical inference. And in March 1943, when the Army Air Forces sends the SRG boxes of bomber damage reports, the case lands on Wald's desk almost by chance. Other mathematicians are busy with torpedo guidance systems and naval gunnery problems. Wald is available. He opens the first box and pulls out photographs of a B-17 that limped home with 187 bullet holes, another bomber with the entire left wing shredded, a third with the tail section nearly shot off. Colonel Groh's report includes detailed diagrams showing where returning aircraft took damage. Wings, 42% of observed hits. Fuselage, 31% of hits. Tail section, 18% of hits. Engines, 9% of hits. The recommendation from aviation experts is clear. Armor the wings first, then the fuselage, then the tail. Wald reads the report 3 times. Then he picks up a pencil and begins calculating. 30 minutes later, he sets down the pencil and stares at the wall. "They're looking at the wrong airplanes," he says to an empty office. He picks up the telephone and calls W. Allen Wallace, the SRG director. "I need a meeting with the military officers," Wald says in his thick accent. "I need to tell them they are doing everything wrong." Wallace pauses. "Abraham, these are colonels and generals, aviation experts, engineers from Boeing. You're saying they're all wrong?" "Yes," Wald replies simply. They are making a fundamental logical error. If we follow their recommendations, many more men will die. Can you prove it? Wald glances at his calculations. Yes, with mathematics. How long do you need to prepare? I am ready now. Act 4. Secret Analysis and Revelation. 510 words. March 18, 1943. Statistical Research Group Offices, Columbia University. Abraham Wald works alone at his desk, surrounded by damage reports and photographs. The office is dark, except for a single desk lamp casting harsh shadows across his papers. He's not building a prototype. He's not conducting experiments. He's doing something far more powerful, pure mathematical analysis. The key insight comes suddenly, like a light switching on. Everyone is analyzing the bombers that came home. They're mapping bullet holes on returning aircraft and assuming those locations need armor, but that's backwards. The bombers they're studying survived their damage. The bullet holes in the wings didn't bring them down. The shots through the fuselage didn't kill them. The shredded tail sections didn't prevent them from landing. Those areas can take damage. The fatal damage, the shots that actually destroy bombers, is on the aircraft that never came home. The planes that crashed in Germany, in France, in the English Channel. The ones nobody's examining because there's nothing left to examine. Wald pulls out a fresh piece of paper and begins constructing what will later be called a survivorship bias analysis. If bullets hit aircraft randomly and ballistics data confirms they do, then returning aircraft should show random damage distribution. But they don't. They show heavy damage in some areas, wings, fuselage, tail, and almost no damage in others, engines, cockpit, fuel system control area. Why? Wald's answer: because planes hit in those undamaged areas don't come home. He creates a simple diagram. On one side, a bomber with bullet holes marked in wings, fuselage, and tail, the pattern everyone's seen. On the other side, a bomber with holes marked in engines, cockpit, and fuel controls, the pattern nobody's seen because those planes are in German fields. The mathematics is elegant in its simplicity. Observed damage locations, JAWR non-fatal hit zones, unobserved damage locations, fatal hit zones. Therefore, armor. The areas showing no damage on returning aircraft. It's counterintuitive. It contradicts every expert opinion. It seems insane, but the math is irrefutable. Wald spends 2 more days constructing formal statistical proof. He calculates expected damage distributions under random fire patterns. He accounts for German fighter tactics and weapons performance. He estimates the probability that the observed damage pattern could occur by chance if all areas were equally vulnerable. The probability, less than 0.001%, effectively impossible. His report is 12 pages of dense mathematical analysis, with one clear recommendation on page 11. Armor reinforcement should be applied primarily to the engine nacelles, cockpit area, and central fuel system controls, areas showing minimal damage on returning aircraft. These represent critical vulnerability zones where damage prevents aircraft return. He adds a crucial calculation. His analysis suggests current loss rates of 5 to 7% per mission could be reduced to 2 to 3% with proper armor placement. Over a year of operations, that's potentially 4,000 aircraft saved. 40,000 crew members. Wald submits the report to W. Allen Wallace on March 23, 1943. Wallace reads it twice, then picks up the phone. "I need to schedule a briefing at the Pentagon," he says. "Immediately." "What's the subject?" the scheduler asks. Wallace glances at Wald's report. "A mathematician is about to tell the Army Air Forces that all their aviation experts are wrong about armor placement." There's a pause on the line. "This should be interesting," the scheduler says dryly. Neither man knows just how interesting it's about to become. Act 5. Bureaucratic Battle, 720 words, April 6, 1943. The Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia. Conference Room 3C427. The room fills with uniforms and credentials. Colonel Malcolm C. Grow, who conducted the original damage surveys, Boeing engineers who designed the B-17, Wright Field material scientists, Army Air Force's brass with enough stars between them to fill a constellation, and Abraham Wald in an ill-fitting suit, clutching a folder of papers. Major General Oliver P. Eccles, Chief of the Air Materiel Command, opens the meeting. Gentlemen, Columbia's Statistical Research Group claims they have new recommendations on armor placement. Professor Wald, you have the floor. Wald stands, adjusting his glasses. His English is halting, heavily accented. Thank you, General. I have analyzed the damage reports from bomber operations. I believe the current armor placement recommendations are incorrect. Colonel Grow sits forward. Incorrect. Professor, with all respect, I personally examined over 200 damaged aircraft. The data is clear. Wings and fuselage take the most hits. Yes, Wald agrees, but that is the problem. The room goes silent. A Boeing engineer speaks up. I'm sorry, Professor. Did you just say that seeing where our planes take damage is a problem? Not seeing the damage is problem, Wald clarifies, his accent making him sound more tentative than his mathematics actually is. You are seeing damage on aircraft that survived. You are not seeing damage on aircraft that crashed. General Eccles frowns. We can't examine crashed aircraft. They're in German territory or at the bottom of the channel. Exactly, Wald says, and that is what my analysis addresses. He unfolds his diagram. The two bombers, one with observed damage, one with inferred fatal damage. If bullets hit randomly, Wald explains, then all areas should show similar damage, but they do not. Some areas, engines, cockpit, fuel controls, show almost no damage on returning aircraft. Why? Because aircraft hit in those areas do not return. The Wright Field chief engineer interrupts. That's speculation. You can't prove what happened to crashed aircraft. I can prove it with probability theory, Wald replies. He distributes his 12-page report. The mathematics is here. Under random fire distribution, the probability of observing this damage pattern, if all areas were equally survivable, is less than 1/10 of 1%. For 5 minutes, the only sound is pages turning and engineers muttering calculations. Finally, Colonel Grow speaks. Professor Wald, your mathematics may be correct, but your conclusion is insane. You're telling us to armor the areas that aren't getting hit? I am telling you to armor the areas where damage is fatal, Wald corrects. The Boeing engineer shakes his head. This contradicts every principle of combat aircraft design. We armor the areas taking fire. You armor the areas where damage is survivable, Wald counters. That is waste of weight. You should armor areas where even small damage causes loss of aircraft. The room erupts. Voices overlap. Engineers cite decades of aviation experience. Military officers invoke combat reports from squadron commanders. Someone points out that Wald has never even seen combat, never sat in a bomber, never faced enemy fire. Wald stands quietly, letting the storm wash over him. When the room finally quiets, he speaks. May I ask question? His voice is soft, but cuts through the tension. General Eccles nods. How many of the bombers you examined for damage analysis? How many had damage to engine nacelles? Colonel Grow consults his notes. Approximately 9% showed engine damage. And how many had damage to cockpit area? Perhaps 6%. And how many bombers did not return from those same missions? Grow's face goes pale. He's starting to see it. Average mission loss rate was 7.2%. Wald nods slowly. So areas showing 9% damage and areas showing 6% damage, these have loss rate of 7.2%. Does this seem random to you? Or does it suggest that all aircraft suffered engine and cockpit damage, but only 7% survived it long enough to show you the holes? The room falls completely silent. General Eccles leans back in his chair, studying Wald. You're saying the absence of evidence is evidence. Yes, General. The planes you are not seeing, those show you where armor is needed. A full minute of silence follows. Then Eccles speaks. Colonel Grow, what's the weight budget for additional armor? 520 pounds, sir. Eccles looks at Wald. Professor, if we have 520 pounds of armor to distribute, where exactly do you recommend it goes? Wald pulls out another document. I have prepared specific recommendations. Engine nacelles, 280 pounds. Cockpit reinforcement, 160 pounds. Fuel system protection, 80 pounds. And your confidence in this analysis? I am mathematician, General. I do not deal in confidence. I deal in probability. The probability that my analysis is incorrect is less than 0.1%. The probability that current recommendations will fail to reduce losses is approximately 85%. Eccles looks around the room at the assembled experts. Gentlemen, objections? The Boeing engineer raises his hand. Sir, with respect, this is the most counterintuitive recommendation I've ever heard. Every instinct says it's wrong. But is the mathematics wrong? Eccles presses. A long pause. No, sir. The mathematics appears sound. Eccles turns to the right field representative. How fast can you implement Professor Wald's recommendations? If we prioritize this, 6 weeks for prototype armor kits, 3 months for full production. Make it 4 weeks, Eccles orders, and get me test results from actual combat operations within 90 days. He looks at Wald. Professor, the Army Air Forces is betting a lot of lives on your mathematics. I hope you're right. Wald adjusts his glasses. General, I am always right about mathematics. It is people who are usually wrong. For the first time all day, someone laughs. CTA number 1, 12 Tau 13, minute mark. If you think this story is incredible, wait until you hear what happened when they actually tested Wald's crazy armor placement in real combat. The results shocked even the skeptics who thought he was insane. But first, make sure you're subscribed. We dig up untold World War II stories like this every single week that you won't find anywhere else. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Act 6. Testing, Combat, and Validation, 1 through 10 words. June 15, 1943. RAF Molesworth, England, home of the 303rd Bomb Group. Master Sergeant Tony D'Angelo watches ground crews install strange armor panels on B-17F, serial number 42-30255, nicknamed Hell's Angels. The armor isn't going where he expects. Instead of reinforcing the wings and fuselage, which already look like Swiss cheese from previous missions, the panels cluster around the engines and cockpit. This don't make no sense, D'Angelo mutters to his crew chief. We take hits in the wings every damn mission. They're armoring the engines? The crew chief shrugs. Orders from right field. Some mathematician says this is where it goes. A mathematician? D'Angelo spits tobacco juice. What's a mathematician know about getting shot at? By late June, 50 B-17s across 3 bomb groups received the experimental armor configuration. The modification adds 487 pounds per aircraft, mostly around engine mounts, oil coolers, cockpit floor, and fuel system controls. The test protocol is clinical. Fly the modified bombers in identical formations alongside standard aircraft. Compare loss rates. Compare damage patterns. Let combat be the laboratory. July 14, 1943. Mission to Le Bourget Airfield, France. Captain Robert Pepper Martin pilots Hell's Angels through a gauntlet of FW-190 fighters. His wingman, a standard B-17, takes cannon hits to the number 3 engine and immediately starts losing power. The engine seizes, catches fire, and forces the bomber to drop out of formation. Martin's Hell's Angels takes hits in almost the same location, concentrated fire on the number 3 engine nacelle. But the armor does its job. The rounds penetrate the engine cowling, but deflect off the armor plating, protecting the engine mount and oil system. The engine keeps running. Martin stays in formation, completes the bomb run, and returns to England. His wingman ditches in the English Channel. 3 crew members drown before rescue boats arrive. Post-mission analysis shows Hell's Angels suffered 12 direct hits to the armored engine nacelle area. Standard armor placement would have left those systems exposed. The bomber would have gone down. 1 aircraft saved. 10 lives saved. The pattern repeats across the summer. August 17, 1943, the infamous Regensburg-Schweinfurt raid. The mission cost the 8th Air Force 60 bombers, but the loss rate tells a compelling story. Standard armor configuration. 24 aircraft lost out of 146 deployed, your 16.4% loss rate. Walled armor configuration. 8 aircraft lost out of 83 deployed, yours are 9.6% loss rate. The difference, 6.8 percentage points. In practical terms, the walled armor configuration reduces bomber losses by 41%. By September, the data is overwhelming. Colonel Grow, who initially opposed Wald's recommendations, compiles a comprehensive report for 8th Air Force Headquarters. The numbers are stark. Mission outcomes. July-September 1943, standard armor, 1,247 sorties flown, 89 aircraft, lost 7.1% loss rate per mission, 890 crew casualties, killed, missing, walled armor. 843 sorties flown, 37 aircraft lost, 4.4% loss rate per mission. 370 crew casualties. The modified armor configuration reduces losses by 38%, while adding only 487 pounds per aircraft, well within acceptable performance parameters. More telling, the types of losses change. Modified aircraft still suffer battle damage, but catastrophic losses drop dramatically. Bombers with walled armor limp home with destroyed wing sections, shot up fuselages, and shredded tails. The damage looks horrific, but the aircraft stay flyable because the critical systems, engines, cockpit controls, fuel systems, remain protected. October 12, 1943, mission to Münster, Germany. Lieutenant James Red Perkins pilots B-17F, Ruthie II, through intense fighter opposition. A Bf-109 makes a head-on attack, cannon rounds walking up the aircraft's nose. Standard armor would protect the wings and fuselage sides. Walled armor protects the cockpit area. A 20mm round penetrates the aircraft nose, passes through the bombardier's position, and strikes the armored cockpit floor. The round, which would have continued upward through Perkins' seat under standard configuration, flattens against the armor plate and ricochets harmlessly into the radio equipment. Perkins returns to England with a piece of flattened German cannon shell that was intended for his spine. He carries it in his pocket for the rest of the war. After landing, he asks ground crew about the armor. They tell him about the mathematician's theory. "This walled guy," Perkins says, "he's never seen combat?" "Never even been in an airplane," the crew chief replies. Perkins laughs. "Well, you tell this mathematician that he just saved my ass using nothing but math. That's the craziest goddamn thing I ever heard." The German pilots notice. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke, a Luftwaffe ace with 31 confirmed kills, writes in his diary on December 8, 1943, the final accounting for the European Theater of Operations, compiled in July 1945, total bomber sorties, 291, 508, estimated lives saved by walled armor configuration, using pre-walled loss rates, 7.1%, versus post-walled rates, 4.4%. Expected losses at old rate, 20,697 aircraft. Actual losses at new rate, 12,826 aircraft difference. 7,871 aircraft saved crew members per aircraft, 10. Total, approximately 78,710 lives saved. That's a conservative estimate. It doesn't account for injuries prevented, aircraft damage that would have been fatal becoming survivable, or the psychological impact of improved survival rates on crew morale. One mathematician. 12 pages of statistical analysis. No experiments, no prototypes, no testing, just pure mathematical reasoning. And nearly 80,000 American airmen came home because Abraham Wald saw what everyone else missed. The most important data is the data you're not seeing. The ending of this story will blow your mind, and it shows why Wald's mathematical insight is still saving lives today in ways you wouldn't believe. Stick around for 2 more minutes to see the modern legacy. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We're just getting started with incredible untold World War II stories. May 7th, 1945. Statistical Research Group Offices, Columbia University. Abraham Wald arrives at his office the morning after VE Day to find a telegram from General Carl Spaatz, commander of the United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe. Professor Wald, stop your statistical analysis of bomber vulnerability saved more American lives than any individual weapon system developed during the war. Stop the Army Air Forces is forever in your debt stop. Wald files the telegram in a desk drawer and returns to his mathematics papers. He never frames it, never mentions it in public. When colleagues ask about his war work, he changes the subject. It was just mathematics, he tells a reporter who tracks him down in 1946. Any competent statistician would have reached the same conclusion. This is demonstrably false. Dozens of competent engineers, experienced pilots, and military experts looked at the same data and reached the opposite conclusion. It took Wald's unique insight, his ability to see what wasn't there, to solve the problem. The post-war accounting is staggering. Production numbers for Wald armor configuration: 12,731 B-17 bombers modified, 18,482 B-24 bombers modified, 6,043 other aircraft types modified. Total, 37,256 aircraft protected by Wald's analysis. Estimated lives saved, 78,710 aircrew members. But Wald's contribution extends far beyond World War II bomber losses. His work on survivorship bias becomes foundational in multiple fields. Medical researchers use his principles to understand why some treatments appear effective. They're only studying the patients who survived. Engineers apply his logic to understand structural failures. They examine the bridges still standing and miss the critical weaknesses in those that collapsed. Modern aircraft design still incorporates Wald's fundamental insight. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter's armor placement follows mathematical vulnerability analysis derived directly from Wald's World War II work. Commercial airliners use statistical damage analysis to identify critical systems requiring redundancy and protection. In 2008, aviation safety investigators studying a Qantas A380 engine failure explicitly cite Wald's principle in their analysis, examining what didn't fail to understand what protections were actually necessary. The business world adopts survivorship bias as a core concept. Tech companies analyze failed startups, not just successful ones, to understand what really drives success. Investment firms study bankrupt companies to identify real risk factors. Abraham Wald never profits from any of this. He refuses military consulting contracts after the war. He returns to pure mathematics, publishing groundbreaking work on statistical decision theory and sequential analysis. On December 13, 1950, Wald and his wife die in a plane crash in India while traveling to a lecture series. He is 48 years old. His obituary in the New York Times mentions his academic work. It doesn't mention that he saved nearly 80,000 lives. In 2018, the Pentagon establishes the Abraham Wald Award for Excellence in Operational Analysis. The citation reads, "For applying rigorous mathematical analysis to complex military problems in ways that fundamentally change operational outcomes." The first recipient accepting the award says, "Wald taught us the most important lesson in analysis. The hardest part isn't finding answers. It's asking the right questions." He asked, "What am I not seeing?" That question saved an entire generation of airmen. Today, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, there's a small memorial in the Air Force Materiel Command headquarters. It shows two bomber silhouettes, one with bullet holes marked where returning aircraft showed damage, one with holes marked where Wald proved the fatal damage actually occurred.